Donald Graham Brasher was born to Gwen and Will at Mrs. Bill's nursing home in Moonta Mines on November 14, 1927. Will was a Methodist minister, and so the whole family, including little sister Margaret, were constantly on the go, moving many times during Dad's childhood. He said this had a profound influence on him, as he found it hard to develop lasting friendships. I feel it probably also taught him resilience and adaptability. At 14, he ran into medical difficulties. Mastoid problems caused him to faint suddenly one day in Adelaide Arcade in Rundle Mall. This meant he had to spend the next months out of school in hospital, a serious setback to his academic studies and aspirations. In the latter stages of World War II and early post-war years, Dad was set to work at 5AD, where he had an odd job role which led to some interesting experiences. When the war ended, he was sent on a train up to Aldgate to interview returning soldiers. He also used to sing in a band at events run by 5AD. This latter fact surprised me when I first learned about it a few years ago. Though he was always fond of music, he watched the Edinburgh Military Tattoo and Carols by Candlelight every year, and he obviously had a natural inclination, if no formal musical training, as he could play an electric organ very nicely by ear. But I never really thought of Dad as an entertainer. He had set his heart on gaining an apprenticeship as an electrician, and when this proved too difficult because of the priority given to jobs for returning servicemen, he eventually took up a job in Lincoln, the latest parish of his itinerant father, where he worked at the powerhouse. On his arrival in Lincoln, he very soon met the love of his life, Stella Williams, and they married in 1950. On several occasions this year, Dad reflected openly on what our mum, his beloved Stella, had meant to him. With solemn emotion, he emphasised, "Moving to Lincoln and meeting her was the best thing that ever happened to me." With her in Lincoln, he found the stable home which he craved, after so many years of his childhood moving from town to town, manse to manse. In 1952, Judith was born, and in 1955, Mary. 9 years later, I turned up. After working at the powerhouse, Dad had a succession of jobs. He worked for Geddes, both in town and as a travelling salesman, and spent a lot of time on the road when Judith and Mary were kids, visiting clients all over Eyre Peninsula. He recounted many anecdotes from that time. Once he offered to take over the care of a sulphur-crested cockatoo which had been left ownerless and which he had to find a way to transport back home. He rigged up a temporary perch, a broomstick wedged across the car from dashboard to the back seat, which the cockatoo happily accepted. When the windscreen broke due to a stray stone, the bird didn't waver, clinging to its perch, feathers ruffling in the breeze, all the way down to Lincoln. Dad eventually was given the opportunity to become an insurance broker with Prudential Insurance, and out of that connection, his own business, Brasher's Lincoln Agencies, eventually grew. His good business sense was recognised by a number of organisations, most notably the RAA, as well as Prudential and the Adelaide Permanent Building Society. Dad also ran a successful offset printing business for many years. Profitable, but the cause of considerable stress at times. It was very much a family affair. I remember those days well. Dad ink-stained and frenetic, trying to meet deadlines for diverse local publications such as the Footy Budget or Tunarama program. Mum madly typing, and one of we three kids collating and stapling, either at the office or often at home at the kitchen table. Dad's energy and industry, on reflection, were defining character traits. He always seemed quite indefatigable. Even at home, he always had a project. As a jack of many trades, electrician, carpenter, bricklayer, photographer, painter, plumber, architect, gardener, artist, singer, he restlessly put his skills to use. He was creative and very handy. He always built stuff, including the very first house he and Stella lived in on Stroud Terrace just after the war, using hard-to-come-by makeshift material like the cement retrieved by wharfies who accidentally broke bags during unloading to make house bricks. At 13 Dorset Place, his workshop was in constant use, making something or other. Several caravans, a treehouse, the ham radio he used for many years. Walls were constructed, paths cemented, garden beds cultivated. A darkroom down in the shed was for photography, both for work and as his own personal hobby. When we moved from our beloved home on the quarter acre at Dorset Place up to his 30 acres on Penmarrick Lane, his ambitions swelled proportionately. A bigger shed, two in fact. A tractor, a small forest of melaleucas and other native trees, a grandiose driveway complete with weather vane and bigger fish pond. He built the bunkhouse with rocks gleaned from its paddocks, one of the few projects I was enlisted to help with as a very unskilled labourer. He ran a small flock of sheep, kept rooks and less successfully cattle, which kept breaking down the fences he erected. He was in his element up there. It was his lifelong dream. A hobby farm matched his diverse, amateur but accomplished skill set. In his last home on Flinders Highway, he had the vision and know-how to design a house which fit the block's odd dimensions, and included also distinctive features, like the high ceiling with raked beams in the TV room, which had the builders scratching their heads at its complex angles. Up there, Dad turned his hand to woodworking, resulting in some lovely pieces, among them a captain's desk complete with a secret compartment for confidential documents, bookshelves, a card table for Mum, and a whole series of grandfather clocks. For our whole family, Dad was a rock-solid foundation. He provided for us materially, gruffly offering financial assistance throughout our lives. We knew he would always be there for us whenever we needed him. And emotionally, he was there in the background, a steady reference point. Dad was not one for emotive shows of affection. His love was undemonstrative and expressed mostly in action, rarely in words. Mary recalls that it was only in recent times that he ever told her he loved her in so many words, and Judith and I are not sure we ever heard them from him ourselves. Nonetheless, I knew he did. I knew it when he surprised me by delivering my first card to me as a 16-year-old one day after school. The pride with which he accompanied me out for lunch when I got my first full-time job, and in his recent enthusiasm for my novel when it was published a couple of years ago. Mary also reminded me of the story the other day that when I was born he drove out to tell the swaffers at Lipson and left a message written with Mum's lipstick in the absence of any other writing in blood. It's a boy. A footnote to that story is that Dad got hit by a car on Tasman Terrace not so long after and suffered a crushed hip which restricted his mobility for decades. Obviously my birth wasn't completely auspicious. We knew he loved us when he would row us out to the sailboat moored off the North Shore for a relieving cold picnic on hot summer nights, and took Mary out there for sleepovers. And in the way he kept a watchful eye on Mary in his pickup boat when she went out sailing on Saturday afternoons as a teenager. And Mary knew it too when he went out to hunt and find her and Laurie's first house. Judy knew he loved her when Dad put radios under their pillows so she and Mary could listen to music as they went to sleep. When he answered the call to build a new piece of furniture for her house, a bookshelf, a craft cupboard for her beads, etc. And she knew it was always there, he was always there, as her go-to for advice whenever she needed it. We all seem to have had the same experience as kids of going to the town library with Dad on the weekends and waiting while he exchanged his books and watching hopefully to see if he would head for treats afterwards. For me, comics. For the girls, lollies. And we all recognised his love for us and all of his grandchildren on Christmas visits, when on the nominated morning he would be the first one awake, hovering around the tree, waiting to preside over the distribution of gifts, and there would be a palpable sense of his joy in our being together. His grandchildren always also loved him for his enthusiasm for taking long tractor rides and building them a cubby house, or just sitting around the dining room table chatting. They appreciated his warmth, kindness, and wry sense of humour. Our respect and love ran deep. I think Dad knew how much we valued him. I think our silent appreciation of all he did for us happened every time we were with him. Judy and Mary honoured him in every act of care and devotion. He knew it even in our grumbled words of frustration with his sometimes curmudgeonly, stubborn ways. He knew we loved him even when we were not physically present. Of late, we shared precious times on our routine Sunday morning video chats that gave us time to share with him endless conversations about his cats and dogs and his current grievances about the world or his failing body, but also moments of sincere reflection and tender affection. Maybe the greatest burden children bear is the debt we cannot repay to our parents. We owe him a lot. How to measure the quality of Dad's life? He was his own man, independent and willful, but also smart and skillful. Although he admitted to being plagued with self-doubts, he was strong in the power of his convictions, without fanfare, and even when others may not have always agreed with them. Dad held true to himself. He built a reputation in Port Lincoln over the years as a respected businessman and community leader. A quietly altruistic spirit found expression in his work for Tunarama, JC's, Rotary and the Old Folks Home. His broad range of knowledge and skills and integrity were valued. A notable achievement was his leadership in bringing the Old Folks Home up to date, including the addition of a purpose-built dementia wing, which he helped to design. Dad had long, strong friendships with Murray and Janet Kopp, Jack and Jessie Willis, Fred and Betty Oswald, Hank and Hilary de Bruyne, John and Edith Williams, and his Wednesday octogenarian lunchmates, Dion Manthorpe and Ken Ladyman. And others not mentioned here. Sorry if I've missed someone. Circumstances did not always work in his favour, but Dad was resilient and resourceful. He provided for his family amply and united with Mum in creating a loving, warm home. We all benefited from his unwavering reliability as a breadwinner, his love and loyalty, his generosity and support. Looking back, I think it is fair to say that in some ways we took Dad for granted for a lot of our lives. It's hard to believe he isn't here now. He has always been there, a constant on which we could rely, consistent in his care for us as the chimes on one of his grandfather clocks. Sharp to the end, at 93 he was still upgrading his computer and iPhone, and at 94 shouting himself a new Apple Watch for his birthday. The night before his final fall he was, as usual, on his computer doing his usual evening online stuff. He lived a long, productive life. We believe a life truly well lived. There is much more we could say, many other rich life experiences and significant family occasions and moments. But for now, you did good, Dad. To close, I'd like to recite a poem I wrote many years ago when I was trying to find words to capture my feelings for him. It's the best I could manage. 4x4. Are you, the furthest man along the wildest shore, knew what and how it was to be adventurer in your workshop, and I, eyes wide, watching without doubt as you saw, believed that this was God, gospel all you did, heretical what you did not, sandpaper, chisel, pliers, common sense, neatly stored on your pegboard wall, were the tools of your mystical apprehension of truth beyond my uncertain perception, while all I absorbed, all I shied from, were the sawdust and shavings of the revelations you cut, fit and joined on your dependable homemade bench. Nothing of my original form remains, save what passed through your workshop. I am your cupboard, your wine rack and grandfather clock, that nail, vice and hammer bore, the shape you yielded from a formless block. Rest in peace, Dad.